You live in a world designed by thinkers, but not the kind who ask why, only the kind who ask, will it work? They taught you to optimize, to weigh lives against lives, to accept collateral damage as necessary. They don't call it cruelty. They call it utility. And so, a weapon was born, not just of steel and fire, but of ancient logic twisted into a modern god. It wasn't hatred that detonated it. It was math. It was theory. It was the calm voice that said, "This is what must be done." You were raised inside that logic, taught to trust the system, the expert, the data. Taught that feeling too deeply makes you weak. But the truth is this: the moment you trade morality for efficiency, you become programmable. They don't want you to remember that. Because if you did, if you remembered what it means to hesitate, to question, to refuse the easy calculus of destruction, you might see through it all. This is not a history lesson. This is not about a bomb. This is about you. And the invisible war inside your mind, between what's right and what simply works. They didn't need monsters to build the bomb. They only needed thinkers. People who believed they were solving a problem. Utilitarianism. It sounds harmless, practical even. The belief that the best action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. It reduces morality to mathematics, turns pain into a number, and people into variables. And so, when a handful of men sat in rooms calculating outcomes, they weren't plotting murder. They were solving an equation. This is the logic that made the atomic bomb not only possible, but ethical in the eyes of its creators. The cities destroyed, acceptable losses. The lives ended, weighted against the lives saved. Moral efficiency became more important than moral reflection. And in that moment, the soul of philosophy cracked. They didn't stop there. Another figure haunted their reasoning: Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of the abyss. He warned of the death of God, of a world where traditional morality no longer binds our decisions. In its place, he spoke of the Übermensch, the overman, a being who creates his own values, rises above the herd, and imposes order onto chaos. To the architects of annihilation, this wasn't just a metaphor, it was permission. They saw themselves as transcending fear and tradition. Not killers, but creators. Not criminals, but gods of necessity. But here's what they don't tell you. When you remove morality from the human heart, it becomes impossible to hear the screams. They taught you to admire their brilliance, to see them as pioneers, visionaries, heroes. But beneath the equations and Nobel Prizes lies a truth no textbook will confess. They made horror rational. And once horror is rational, once it fits neatly inside a theory, it never stops growing. They promised peace. They promised safety. They promised it was the only way. But every promise came wrapped in silence. And now, that same logic lives inside you, in the algorithms you obey, in the compromises you make, in the quiet voice that whispers, "It's not ideal, but it's efficient." This is how it begins. Not with malice, not with hatred, but with an idea. Clean, logical, detached. An idea that does not weep. And the question now is not what they did. It's what you'll do with the same tools. They called it the Manhattan Project. But there was no skyline, no steel towers, just sand, silence, and a race against a future no one wanted to live in. A secret operation buried under the language of necessity. A laboratory of minds, brilliant, fractured, obedient. Officially, it was science. Unofficially, it was prophecy. Not the kind you read in scripture, but the kind you write in equations and drop from the sky. The Manhattan Project was more than a technological triumph. It was a philosophical rupture, a moment where human intellect outpaced human conscience, where theory became weapon and knowledge became a mask. Not to hide the truth, but to avoid looking it in the eye. Moral distancing became standard practice. It's a term used in psychology to describe how people separate their actions from emotional consequence. In war, this looks like orders. In science, it looks like data. And in the desert, it looked like Oppenheimer quoting scripture. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. But what he became was more tragic than divine. A man who built the god he feared. They tell you science is neutral, that it doesn't choose sides, that it only discovers. But discovery without direction becomes destruction. Compartmentalization was their tool. Each scientist worked on a part, rarely the whole. One man designed casing, another calculated yield. No one had to carry the burden alone, because the burden was divided, diluted, sanitized. It was brilliant. It was efficient. It was horrifying. And still, they called it progress. They used terms like megaton, fission, target radius. But what they were building had no language, only aftermath. Only silence so loud it could split the sky. This is how science became theology. Not in the pursuit of truth, but in the faith that power could be pure if calculated correctly. And the men who pressed forward? They weren't evil. They were convinced. Convinced that the bomb would end the war, that the casualties were a cost, not a tragedy, that the ends justified the equations. But here's the truth. When your ethics are outsourced to a formula, there is no one left to scream, "Stop." And so it continued. The test, the flash, the city, and a new world was born. Not through diplomacy or morality, but through numbers. Now, ask yourself, in a world that worships data, that trades humanity for automation, that applauds productivity over principle, how far are you from becoming them? You think it ended with Hiroshima, that the bomb was the climax, the rupture, a historical scar, never to be reopened. But you're wrong. The logic that made the bomb acceptable never left. It simply changed clothes. Today, it wears a suit. It speaks in quarterly reports. It whispers through algorithms. The moral detachment that once allowed men to split atoms now splits attention spans, populations, economies. And just like before, the math makes it feel rational. You see it in utilitarianism, the cold arithmetic of the greater good. Jeremy Bentham's vision of a happiness calculus. John Stuart Mill's dreams of maximized well-being. And yet, in practice, this greater good always seems to favor the powerful. It's the same principle that justifies surveillance. If watching everyone keeps the majority safe, then privacy becomes a luxury, and freedom becomes a variable in a spreadsheet. It's the same logic behind technocracy. The belief that those with the data should rule, that ethics are inefficient, that nuance is noise. And so, the world is reshaped by those who believe their models are more accurate than your fears. They call it innovation. But beneath it lies the same shadow: justified destruction. It's no longer about cities. Now, it's about ecosystems, cultures, identities, inner worlds. The bomb was a beginning. It proved you could sever humanity from consequence as long as you did it cleanly. Today, you live inside systems built on this same clean severance. Attention economies that weaponize dopamine, corporate structures that automate exploitation, governments that measure harm in tolerable percentages. They no longer need to drop bombs. They simply nudge, redirect, optimize. And you? You've adapted. You've learned to speak in efficiencies, to accept mass layoffs as strategic pivots, to call digital dependency engagement, to swallow discomfort as the price of progress. But at what cost? Because if the future is shaped by detached calculations, by equations without ethics, then your soul becomes just another line item, just like the cities. The legacy isn't the mushroom cloud. It's the idea that some outcomes are worth any price, that morality is negotiable as long as the model is clean. And if that logic continues unchecked, then what comes next will make the past look merciful. They don't need you to agree. They just need you to adapt. You've been taught to see the world in neat, logical terms. The greater good, the necessary sacrifice, the inevitable progress. It's a well-spun illusion, crafted to numb the ethical questions that lurk beneath the surface. But the truth? It's more uncomfortable than that. It always has been. They tell you that suffering is just a side effect, a collateral damage of the grand design. They sell you the future as a series of inevitable calculations, as though the price of progress could ever truly be justified by the outcomes. You've seen this before, haven't you? A single decision made on behalf of millions, a bomb dropped, a life lost, for a brighter tomorrow. At least, that's the story they want you to believe. But somewhere, buried beneath the equations, the greater good becomes a ghost. An abstract concept used to absolve the guilt of those in power, those who wield control from the shadows. And this system, this cycle of rationalization, has seeped into the fabric of modern life. You no longer hear about deterrence. Now, it's about optimization. Maximizing profits, maximizing control, maximizing reach. But the cost is the same. Your autonomy, your voice, your humanity. They are still here. Still using the same philosophies, the same justifications to manipulate. But now, it's not about the bomb. It's about your time, your data, your decisions, and this is the quiet war you fight daily. Not against an enemy you can see, but against the invisible forces that shape your reality. The ones who believe they know what's best for you, better than you know yourself. You've been given a tool to wake up from this. It's called awareness. And with awareness, you can shatter the illusion. It begins with a simple realization. Your autonomy is yours to reclaim. The logic that once justified the bomb, the ethics that turned death into a numbers game, they do not have to rule you. You have the power to ask the right questions, to demand more than a transactional existence. You are not a part of their equation. You are not the collateral damage. They do not control you unless you let them. And that is the first step to liberation. So, will you continue to accept the illusion? Or will you start seeing the world as it truly is? A place where every choice matters and where every life has inherent value. The answer lies within you.